You're listening to Food Rebels, and welcome. This is the podcast that brings you brands, chefs, and live on-air tastings. A show that's dedicated to the more rebellious side of the food world, where we celebrate the people who have challenged the status quo. We'll be giving you a peek behind the curtains and inside the minds of the people who are shaking up our food industry. You know me, I'm the show host, AJ Sharp, taste expert, food writer, great taste food judge, and of course, business owner. I love meeting new people and tasting new foods. So, sit back as we hear more stories from people in food who dare to be different. Hello and welcome to Food Rebels. We're joined by someone who lives and breathes food stories, not just writing them, but this person has been shaping the way we cook, read and talk about food here in the UK. Samuel Goldsmith is the senior food editor at Immediate Media, the powerhouse behind Good Food, Olive and Easy Cook. Also the voice behind the Good Food podcast. And now he's launched his second cookbook, which is all about one of my favourite comfort foods, the Frozen Pea Cookbook. Sam, welcome to Food Rebels.
Thank you for having me. That's a very nice introduction.
I'm very excited to have you on the book. Have you on the book? Have you here in the studio, the virtual studio? Although you're in a very unusual location, aren't you?
I am. I know, but now I'm going to sound like I'm really bougie, and I'm not really bougie, but I am in a spa. I'm in the boardroom of a spa because I double booked, and that makes me sound disorganized, which I probably am. But yeah, I don't know where I am because I can't pronounce it, as I told you before the show, but I'm in a spa.
I love that you're in a spa. I love that you're going to go and relax after this and to have a glass of something delicious and relax.
Yeah, I've had a massage. I've been in the steam room. I've been for a swim. And now, like I told you, I didn't just get back into my robe. I am changed, showered and changed, especially for you.
Thank you so much. I do appreciate that. Thank you so much for giving up your time on such an important, relaxing day. To come and talk to us about your cookbook. I'm so fascinated by you and your whole history. I was doing some research about you just before you came on air. Did you really work at Lad Bible?
Well, that was actually just one day. Not that I did it for a day and then left. And Lad Bible wouldn't have known that I was working, that I did a shoot for them.
Did you?
My friend organised. What was it? It was a pride shoot for Smirnoff, I think.
Awesome.
And he asked me to help with basically do the food styling for the shoot. So I did that. And I never saw it anywhere. But, you put these things in your bio to make it sound cool. So
it just made me giggle. I was like, did not expect to see that.
I'm really not Lad Bible.
No, you're not, really.
In fact, maybe I should delete it because it feels disingenuous, really. Disingenuous. But I did do it. I did do a shoot for Lad Bible, yeah.
That's amazing. And you are so busy, aren't you? You're running the Good Food podcast. I was just listening to your dulcet tones interviewing Felicity Cloak.
Oh, yes. Yeah, that was a recent one. Yeah.
A recent one, which is, I love Felicity. And you guys were just having such a good giggle.
Yeah, it was quite difficult in a sense of like doing something for good food is great. Obviously, because that's where I work and it's my job. But also you're kind of mindful that you have to be the voice of good food as well as your own voice. So then when you're in a room with someone that you know really well and you want to tell all these stories that probably you shouldn't, you have to kind of, be careful, but not too careful, but careful enough that you don't, give anything away.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Podcasting is really interesting, isn't it? Because it's this lovely free form kind of conversation, but also, I guess if you're representing such an established and, authoritative publication, you've got to have your work head on.
Yeah, it's kind of, it's strange. It's great. I love it. It's definitely the best part of my job, but it's, you have to kind of, it's just more, it's harder when, because you refer to the Felicity Cloak episode, that's like a more difficult thing when you're sat with someone you know really well and actually you just want to chat rubbish for an hour, but you can't. Because you've got to give the listeners something to take away rather than the fact that you know each other really well.
Yeah, so how does it work then? How do you balance your workload between, as senior food editor, what does that mean? What does that entail?
Well, I guess my job really, and that part of my job is mainly kind of managing workflow, which is going to sound really boring to your listeners, but I basically, because I used to be a teacher, I think they were like, right, great, he's bossy, so let's get him in and he'll tell everybody what to do and make sure everyone hands their work in on time. Do I manage that? Mostly, I would say, but I'm not that bossy.
Bossy and nails on grammar.
Yeah, well, yeah, I guess that's partly more, I would say, food writing grammar, which is more making sure the recipe works and kind of they've not accidentally put tablespoons instead of teaspoons or cups when we don't use cups.
Absolutely. I mean, I did a food writing workshop, or recipe writing workshop, and I was so surprised how complicated it is, because as a sort of relatively keen cook, you literally just you expect all the ingredients to be there, you expect all the method to be there. I'd never really realized that the ingredients were all in order of use, and I'd never really realized that every single unit has been very carefully checked to make sure. I mean, it's nuts, isn't it? There's an absolute art form.
And tested as well. Like all of Good Food's recipes are triple tested, or when we make sure they work. So it's really, it's kind of not only are you putting a lot of work into making sure that recipe looks correct, but there's so much work that goes into a recipe. And I think that kind of has to be, because I think that when you're first starting out cooking, a lot of people don't have much confidence. So I think that's kind of why people trust Good Food, I think, because if they haven't got that confidence, they don't feel let down. And I think that can kind of put people off cooking sometimes.
Absolutely. And everyone knows that the Good Food recipes work because you guys have tested them 3 times. You've tested them on different ovens. You've tested them using different kind of receptacles. Is that the right word?
That sounds good.
It does,
yeah,
doesn't it?
Like a bowl,
I don't know if
different
that's
bowls.
the right word. Different bowls in it. Different stuff. And you've literally tested 2 or 3 times, and it's like specifically this, and you'll always put the note in, like specifically this won't work in a ceramic dish, or
yes, if that's the case. And I think also if for any reason something doesn't work, we will always test it. We'll always, you can email in and you can check with what's going on, and we always check it and test, just have a look at what we think might have happened. And actually, you mentioned ovens. Invariably, ovens are always the problem because everybody's oven is different.
Yeah.
And I think the best thing, 2 things I think the best things you can get for your kitchen: an oven thermometer and a temperature probe, because then you'll know the actual temperature of your oven, and then you'll also know the internal temperature of something, so you don't overcook it.
Hang on, an oven thermometer, as in literally you might have turned it to 180, but actually it's not 180 on the inside.
Yeah, it won't be 180. Even if you well, I mean, I don't want any oven brands coming after me, but I suspect that even if you bought the most expensive oven in the world, it probably would be a little bit out.
No.
So I think, and I think you could, like me and my dad had the same brand of oven, and ours weren't the same temperature. So I think it's just, and over time, I guess the thermostat, I don't actually know if there is a thermostat in an oven, but I think the temperature doesn't quite sit right. So if you can do that, and also different parts of your oven can be different temperatures. So I just think it's super useful to know that you're baking at the right temperature.
Yeah, absolutely. I always, in my marriage, my partner is a baker. He is a follower of recipes in a perfect order and gets it absolutely spot on. I am definitely the kind of experimental cook. Oh no, I don't have that. I'll just chuck some of this in, and I don't know why it didn't turn out quite as it was supposed to, but it's fine.
I'm your partner. I would check. I like to follow a recipe. Even if I'm testing my own recipes, I write it first and then I test it to the T.
Brilliant.
And I might change a couple of things as I'm going if I don't think it's working, but I'd like to follow it along.
Absolutely spot on. Well, it's amazing. I mean, your book, your beautiful book, which arrived here in the studio today. Thank you so much for sending us a copy, because frozen peas is my family's comfort food. Honestly, my children come in from school, and if they've already they're allowed bread or fruit. And if they're like, I don't want bread, I don't want fruit, they often go and get a little ramekin and fill it full of frozen peas and just eat the frozen peas as they are. How weird is that? But I don't even think it's weird. We do it as a family.
Yeah, loads of people do it, I think. Although I should say that does say on the back of the packet that you shouldn't do that. So I don't want to be telling people that that's safe in case they come for me. But loads of people do it. My friend used to do it at school. She used to buy a bag of frozen peas on the way to school and eat them, which I had never, ever heard of. And I think really before I started writing the book, I only ever thought of them as like a side. or kind of in like a shepherd's pie or something. Hadn't quite explored how versatile they were.
The obsession that the nation actually has with
Mm,
peas. It's like with
yeah.
weaning kids, it's one of the first things that they eat because it's so sweet, especially a petit pois. It's
Wow.
like they're just so sweet and they like picking them up and just mushing
That
them.
terrifies me though, because I mean, I haven't got children. I've got two little brothers who were like, I think the youngest is 20 years younger than me. But if that would freaks me out because if they choked on a pea, but I guess they're small enough, aren't they, that you
Peas are
can just
small
swallow it.
enough. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like grapes and blueberries you want to worry about.
Okay. Right. I'll if I ever have children, I'll know now.
If you ever near any, yeah,
Yeah.
fine with peas. But I love peas. We have peas in everything. My favourite meal at or my favourite kind of university snack of, oh my goodness, I don't think I've had any vegetables for a few days. I've just been out drinking and I haven't really been looking after myself. Used to be microwaved peas with some cheese grated on top.
Oh, very nice. But they are so tasty on their own. They're great. And there's, like you say, the sweetness and they're just yeah, I just think they're great. I mean, obviously they're great in recipes as well, hence why I wrote the book. But
Mm.
they are so I think yeah, like you know, your children doing it from frozen, I think even if you cook them, blanch them quickly and put some garlic and cheese, parmesan with them or whatever, I think just simple, they're great.
They are great. So what was it about peas? Why did you decide? Because your first,
Um
yeah, sorry.
yeah. No, go. No, please.
Well, I was like jumping around on questions there because your first book was tomato soup, was it?
Yeah, tin tomatoes.
Tin tomatoes. Tin
Yeah.
tomatoes. Okay, so pure ingredient again.
Yeah. I think it's more about those ingredients that everybody has in the cupboard but they don't necessarily think as kind of like the heart of the meal or to base the meal around them. So I mean, a tin of tomatoes is slightly different, to be fair, to frozen peas because it does form the basis of many a dish.
Mm.
Um, but I just think people have always got a tin of tomato. Sorry, I think people have always got a tin of tomatoes in the cupboard, and
Yeah.
people always have a packet of frozen peas in the freezer. So for me, it's easy to form a meal around it. And you can do that really easily with like sometimes you can just do it. So in each of the books, there's the chapter on store cupboard saviors. So they're always with ingredients that I would tend to have in the cupboard or the freezer or the fridge. Or like you can just go to your corner shop if you're lucky enough to have one and pick up what you need.
Amazing. So what do
Um,
you mean by store cupboard saviour?
I would think of that as something when you've got home, you've completely forgotten to think about dinner, and you just need to rustle something up with what you've got in at that time. Or you've got, you know, you live near one of those local supermarket things or a really nice local shop, and you can just pick up some bits like, I don't know, an onion or a tin of tomatoes or yeah, some simple veg
Mm.
or some like I think I've got one in the P book, which is literally like supermarket tortellini, and then or ravioli, and then some butter. So you brown the butter, mix that through the cooked ravioli through, and then the frozen peas, just so it's super simple. So I think there might be some parmesan in there as well. And they're just things that you like. A lot of people have those raviolis in the freezer.
Yeah.
So you can just defrost them. Or, I mean, I'm guilty of actually having stuff in the freezer and defrosting it half an hour before I need it, which I think you're not supposed to do.
Yeah, I do that all the
Um,
time. Who
yeah,
actually has the foresight though before going to work to take
I don't
something
know.
out? Nobody.
I don't have
Nobody
nobody.
normal.
Not unless you don't work, maybe, or you love it. That I mean, I love cooking, but I don't love having to think about it all the
I
time.
don't like planning it.
No, some people are good at that though, the meal planning, and I do think probably for food waste that's good. But then also I feel like for food waste, if you can cook what's in your house, that's better because you're not wasting anything.
Yeah. I think what this book, as I'm flicking through, is making me think is really thinking about the pea because the pea is it's like a bean, isn't it? In that it's one of those
Mm,
superfood type things. I don't know if it's actually a superfood and whether that even has a classification, but it's a vegetable, but it's also got protein in it, but it's also got some carbohydratey kind of thing going on.
yeah, because you're eating the whole thing. You don't well, you take it out of its pod, but you don't take it out of its skin.
Mm.
And yeah, it does have protein in as well. I'm not a nutritionist, so I won't go
We won't comment
into
on
too
that.
much nutritional detail. Um, yeah, but it is, and also because it's frozen, it's picked and frozen within 2.5 hours.
Is it?
So you've done all of that, which means that nutritionally, it's you're holding that in without something from the supermarket, that's been on the shelf for God knows how long. Like a
Mm.
fresh pea in at this time, I think we are in pea season now in June. Delicious, but if you don't grow it in your garden, how long has that been on the shelf before you've actually used it? Whereas for a frozen pea, that it was only 2.5 hours from when it was picked to when you're eating it.
I wonder if that's why it's so vibrantly green. When you kind of
Mm,
douse it straight into boiling water, immediately it's like really bright, kind of alien green
yeah.
and looks really beautiful, doesn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. Obviously, if you overcook it, it goes a bit
Goes a bit grey.
dull. But with tinned peas, they put the pea in, they have to put dye in because when you cook it at that temperature for like that long, it goes grey. So if you have I think you can buy tinned peas without any additives, that they're never green. That's not a fact about frozen peas, but it is a fact about
It is a
peas.
fact about peas. I've just found there's a sweet section in this pea book
Yes.
of pea cake with coconut frosting
Yeah, I
and
love
pea
coconut.
muffins with cheese
Yeah.
cream cheese frosting.
Yeah, I do. I mean, it's when I did the Tin Tomatoes book, I said to my the publisher, I was like, "Oh, I'll do a dessert, I'll do a pudding or like something sweet because that'll people will find that fun." And then I think she was like, "Yeah, but they'll also think it's not really serious." And I was like, "Yeah, that's fair." The only thing I could think of to do with the tin of tomatoes was put it in a brownie because it would be the only thing that could hide the flavour of the tomato, probably. But for peas, because they're not overpowering, they're great in cake. So there's the one, yeah, the cake with coconut frosting is more like a sort of traditional layered cake. So two layers with coconut frosting in the middle and around. And then, like you say, there's the muffins or the cupcakes. And then also there's probably my favorite one, which is the one that people have kind of picked up on the most, is the pea, pistachio, and matcha cake.
I was just looking at that. It looks absolutely
Yeah.
stunning.
And
Bright
that's got the
green and
lime frosting as well.
yeah, it looks so beautiful.
People said, "How did you come up with that?" And I literally just thought of everything green. And then I thought, oh, it'll work in a cake. And
It'll be
luckily it
fine.
did.
Chuck some spirulina in. I love
Yeah,
it
and
though.
actually, I did see some. Where was I? I went um rather boringly. I went. Well, it's not boring actually. It was interesting. I went to London Open Gardens, and I went to the Barbican Wildlife Garden, and they nearby this little coffee shop, and did a similar cake without the peas, but they did like a raspberry frosting, so you get like a pink frosting.
Mm.
So I did think actually you could always make it a bit multicolored and do a little pink frosting if you want.
And kids always love, well, everyone loves food that's slightly the
Yeah,
wrong colour to the colour it's supposed to be.
I think so. Yeah, and also it's because it's in a loaf tin, it's super easy to make. So I do think for kids it's really easy.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's amazing. I mean, there's a lot of different recipes in here. There's kind of,
Mm.
roast chicken and, vegetarian recipes and vegan recipes and recipes with meat. What's your favourite kind of food to cook?
You know what? I am quite a sort of basic home cook, as in not, I can do the other stuff. I can make choux pastry and do all of that kind of fancy stuff, but just love food that's really comforting. I kind of like if I go, I'm lucky enough to go to some Michelin star restaurants every now and then. And they're lovely, and it's really nice to see some like people that are really thinking about what they're putting on the plate and kind of coming up with new concepts and things. But then I just love when you go to kind of like, I don't know, somewhere where they're just cooking something really comforting and kind of something slow cooked. I just love that kind of wholesome food, really. I went to somewhere in is it Bergen, I think, when we went on a trip, and there was this restaurant, I think it was called the Daily Pot. And you literally just had like six pots of food, and you just go in, and everything's like a sort of soup or a stew or something like that, and you can choose between those six things, and it was just so great because that's the kind of thing I like to eat, really.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. At the weekend, we went to a restaurant. I don't. It's called. Oh, what's it called? Rochelle Canteen, I think.
Oh yes, very nice. Margot
Near.
Henderson, isn't it?
Yes. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness, that was incredible. But it was quite simple food,
Mm,
just done beautifully with incredible depth of flavour, and it was
yeah.
comforting. It was like lamb and caponata, and it was just like, oh, so
Yeah,
good.
that's what I want. I just want to I want to look at it and think, yeah, that's what I want to eat. I don't want to look at it and go, what is that? What's this person trying to do here? I mean, sometimes I want that. Sometimes that's nice to kind of think, oh, that's really clever. But most of the time, if I'm hungry, I just want a massive bowl of pasta or something.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. If I'm going to go fancy, if I want fancy food, I'm quite a big fan of just having a few starters because I can't
Yeah.
quite decide. And then I always find mains really disappointing. Like, why have I had to pay loads for a huge amount of something that doesn't
Yeah,
taste
that
as
wasn't
good
as
as any of
good.
the starters?
I was saying that to someone the other day, actually, how starters are always better than the
Always
mains.
better.
Yeah. I do like it when places do things that I think are clever and comforting. And when I say I think clever, that probably means they're not that clever, just I am not that intelligent. But
I
the
think your opinion of whether some food dish is clever or not is probably one to listen to.
but you know, if you go to somewhere like Kiln in London, that is just I just love it so much. You don't think you can book, so you turn up, and I quite often go on my own because then I can always get in, eat quickly. And it's just so like comforting, but also I'd never cook that food because I know I wouldn't be able to do it justice. I want to say it's Thai, but that's probably wrong. Um, yeah, I just love it so much. And I think places like that where you can go and have an authentic experience outside of going to the country because maybe you can't afford to go or whatever. I think that's great. And also it's not super expensive. I think that's always nice when you can go somewhere and have a good meal and you haven't sort of had to then not eat again until the following month.
Yeah, I can see that. I wanted to ask you about the kind of, there's obviously a lot of stuff going on about ultra processed food and things. And one of
Mm,
the trends that we saw coming through or was kind of predicted for 2025 was the increase in people buying pure ingredients. So things like frozen peas,
yeah.
tinned tomatoes, rice, beans. And I wanted to know, what's your take on all of it?
Gosh. I think that's really interesting. Like we've had a couple of guests on the podcast talking about ultra processed foods, and I find it fascinating. I have like a sort of visceral react response, which is, of course, we should all not be eating ultra processed foods. And then I kind of take a step back and I think, well, how can you not? Because if you haven't really learned to cook properly, which is likely with the education system, today, because most schools, I wouldn't say most, but a lot of schools don't really teach cookery anymore. And if it's got better, I will say it has actually got better since I was teaching. But yeah, so I think there's things like that. There's also the confidence, there's the time, there's all these elements, and plus the fact that these shops are putting these foods right in front of you to eat. I think there's no surprise that people are eating all these ultra processed foods. But I do think what's good is that people are understanding now that it can't form the majority of your diet.
Mm.
Um, and I would just say to people that if you can start cutting it out gradually, then that would be great, and just try as hard as you can to find a way that works for you to cook simply and with using as many unprocessed foods as you can, or like natural foods. Um, but I also think like if you there are some so what the when we were talking to nutritionists about it, she was saying there are some foods that are process that actually, if you aren't good at cooking or you aren't going to make foods from scratch, then actually they form an important part of your diet. Like I think bread that's been fortified with certain nutrients.
Mm.
So yeah, I'm just waffling now, but I think it's a really difficult subject because I think that if you're somebody who uses a lot of ultra processed foods because that is the only way in which you feel confident eating, then I don't think it's right for people that have time, have the knowledge to
And the
kind of judge
means.
them and the means as well. Yeah, it's not. Although I do think if you can, I don't know. I think it's really difficult because as well, living in London, it's easy for me to say, well, if you can go to the market, you can pick up a bowl of
Mm.
X, Y, Z for a pound. But I haven't always lived in London, and I know that like even when I lived in the southwest, like it markets weren't as easy to come by unless you drive out to them, which means you're spending half a day going to somewhere to get some fresh produce
Hmm.
that's cheap. So I think it's really hard. I just think I think if it's about learning what you can use that's affordable for your budget and also that you feel comfortable and confident cooking. And I think that is a responsibility for people like myself that are writing recipes because I think that we need to start cutting out those ingredients so that they're not out, right in front of people's eyes. But also I think that probably the supermarkets need to start kind of helping out a bit, and but I don't know how that would work, and I'm not a political person really, so I shouldn't say.
No, I know exactly what you're saying. There's so many sides to it, isn't there? When I first sort of started deep diving into this, and I read an article by the brilliant Bea Wilson about, I don't know, it's about 5 years ago that she first introduced this concept. And I remember at the time having quite a visceral, I don't want to know,
Yeah,
like almost cross going, I'm a really busy, I'm a mum, I'm
yeah,
running a
yeah,
business, I haven't got time. Are you now telling me, are you high? Am I supposed to go and like make this? Are you kidding? I'm not going to do that. I'm just not. And it was
yeah.
like, you know, it's taken a lot of time and a lot of kind of rereading. And I've read Ultra Processed People by Chris Van Tulleken, and we've got Dolly Van Tulleken coming on the show next week. And I'm fascinated by it, but I'm actually receptive now. But I have to say, I've spent 3 to 5 years going, no thanks.
It's really hard because I think you kind of feel judged a little bit, I
Yeah,
think, when
totally.
and I do think that's where you have to be really careful, and you have to sort of bring people along on the journey and do it slowly. And I think the same is true a little bit. You know, it's the same way that we think about climate change, is that when someone comes down really heavy on you and it's like, you can't do this, you can't do that, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that, why are you doing that? Why are you doing this? I think your one's response is almost like, whoa, like, who are you to tell me? Rah, 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 rah.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're kind of like saying to people, oh, well, of course you can still eat this, but why don't you also, you know, for one day a week, why don't you try and do this?
Yeah.
And then gradually you kind of ease over to it, because you can't expect people to just change the way that they cook and change it the way that they eat
I mean, I haven't.
immediately.
I haven't been able
No,
to
no.
because at the end of the day, I'm still working. I'm still trying to,
Yeah.
the juggle's real, right? But there's two things I think that happened. One, I did what you're saying is I just started to swap out some of the worst offenders and just started
Yeah.
to look at the back of the packs and be like, okay, stabilizers, emulsifiers, apparently these things aren't great. Some are not as bad as others. Fine, fine. But again, who's got time? But I
Yeah.
did do it. And I think the second one was I think there's a big cultural thing about none of us got time. We're all on the go. We're all on the go. There's food on the go. As you know, there's all these things that talk about needing to eat your breakfast while you're running along, presumably to catch your train to get to London or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, the kind of showing us all being harassed. We are all harassed. You know, we are all. I have got my kids kind of having an argument with me about their sports kit as I'm trying to get out the door. This is true. But I think because it's also then reflected back to us through certain media sources and things, it makes it worse. So you start to really go, gosh, I really don't have time. And what I've been fascinated by is when I went, I really think I need to make time now to, you know, occasionally make my own bread, or I haven't actually done that one. I just thought that sounded
No, I
good.
don't
I haven't done that. I did once do it in lockdown, but anyway, that was a long time ago. I just started to make more time to actually make something in advance, and suddenly, you know, to actually prep a recipe or something, and actually discovering that it didn't take necessarily that much more time than just sticking a chicken Kiev in the air fryer was taking
No,
previously.
exactly. And there are some like really clever people, I think, as well, like Suzanne Mulholland, who's the batch lady.
Oh
And
yes, yeah.
she batch cooks. What I think of batch cooking is that I'll make a chili, say, and I'll cook 400 portions of it, and then I'll put them in the freezer, and then, or I'll leave it in the fridge for a while, and we will eat chili every single day for the rest of our lives. But she's so clever with it and prepares it before cooking sometimes, like lays it in a bag, freezes it. And then when you're ready, you get that bag out and you sort of finish the cooking. And I think we need to just be thinking about it in ways that, like I say, it helps people that don't necessarily know how to cook, or think that they don't know how to cook. Because actually, I feel that most people are actually quite good at cooking. They just don't feel like they are. And
Yeah.
probably that's because they put it in front of their kids and their kids go, yeah, even though that's not really true. It's just that in the moment that child feels like that.
Mm.
So I think, I think we need to kind of learn to cook that in a way that it works with what you do.
Mm.
And I also do really wish that food was taught in schools more. I think that would really help. I think,
Yeah.
you know, it wasn't that long ago that we were eating better.
Yeah.
Um, and I think a lot of that, I mean, I don't know. I'm kind of always a bit careful what I say with this one, because I feel like my views on it are not necessarily correct. But I do feel like if we lived in a society where somebody was able to stay at home, or both people were able to kind of work a bit less so that you can take some time to batch
That's
cook,
the
take some
answer.
time to mm. Because
Sorry,
we
no.
used to, historically it was one person would be at home and one person would be out to work. And I'm not saying I want a return to the 1950s where, somebody has to stay home, but I think if both people are able to live their lives and how they want to, and then that would help. Although that also is a bit tricky because not everybody is in a couple. So
Well, that's true. But taking that example, because there are some people who are, I think it's really interesting that it was always, traditionally, it was all or nothing, wasn't it? One person went out to work
yeah,
and person stayed at home. And immediately you said that as a female, I had that moment where I was like, well, I'm not staying at home. But
yeah,
actually, I think the answer is that we all work too much. I mean,
yes, absolutely, yeah,
Gen Z have come into the workplace and they're triggering the bejesus out of everybody in the workplace who's an old millennial, Gen X, boomer, because they come in on time and they leave on time and they take
mm,
an hour at lunchtime and they are living, they are literally just doing the work that they're contracted to do and often very well. It's not about the output, it's about actually having those boundaries, which
yeah,
I think older generations have traditionally been told, oh, no, 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 I know those are your contracted hours, but you're going to work much, much more than that. And that's really hard. But I suppose this is linking on to the next thing where I think there is a whole, I've got mums who work in my other company and they come
mm,
in for 5 hours and they come in at 9:30 and they're like, can't talk. And they're incredible
yeah,
and they leave at 2:30 on the dot. And they get, I think, a whole day's work done, but in 5 hours.
mm,
And I just think it's amazing. And I literally look at the whole structure of working a 7 or 8 hour day. And I think maybe all of us should go down to a smaller amount, work more intensely for a shorter amount of time, have more time to go
yeah.
home and cook decent food.
I think it's really the whole like work life ecosystem is just so
Toxic.
well. It's also there's just so much to think about. Like we're really lucky at Immediate. Like we have days where we have a lot of speakers will come in and they'll kind of talk to us about all different a variety of things. Like we'll have a climate day, we'll have a future focus day, and we had this lady came. I feel terrible because I can't remember her name, but she came in and she was talking about how we don't, as country, as the majority of countries think about how well a country is doing based on its GDP, whereas actually, if we thought about the happiness of the country, that would be a much more effective way of looking at measuring a country's success. And I kind of think that's love. Like, it wouldn't that be great? But I also, I often stay out of any conversation like this purely because I don't think I understand everything. So I
No, well,
think you
that's
have to
true,
kind of
isn't
be
it?
careful what I say. But I think it would be so nice if, yeah, if people, if that we measured a country's success on how happy people were. But I also do think that there's something in what you were saying earlier about the Gen Z and then the older generations. Like I think as a millennial, maybe I'm a geriatric millennial, I'm not sure. Um, I think I felt like I was brought up to work. Like I showed success based on who I was and in my job, not necessarily what I achieved in my social life or how happy I was. But that's what I kind of like about not all Gen Z, because I think that we do have a problem around like labeling them as all being the same.
Mm.
Um, but I do think I love like that. I think it's refreshing, and I love it when I'm around a table and people are moaning about Gen Zers. And I never say anything because, as I say, I don't know what I'm talking about. But I just kind of like listening to people moaning about, it, and I kind of thinking, aren't they doing it right? Aren't they like having a really good life?
Yeah.
But yeah,
I think they probably are doing it right. I think that's why everyone's really triggered by it.
it's
And
jealousy.
it is. That's exactly what it is. And I think, and I'll admit, I found it really hard. I was triggered by it. And actually, I've now gone full circle and I'm now going,
Mm,
no, no, you were right. And actually, what they have brought is definitely an influence into our company of being much clearer on boundaries and being much more respectful of someone who does decide to work late. everyone will notice it and be like, oh, thanks for doing that. Thanks for like, you know, taking the extra trouble to wrap up the project or whatever it was. There's more respect for that rather than it being expected.
Yeah, I think, and also I find it really interesting because I think what it's often about is people having an expectation that other people will do something in the same way that they've done it. So, like when I was teaching, for example, you get a new education minister come in, or education secretary, and you'd hear them talking about all these changes they were going to make. And I'd be thinking, I just feel like you're trying to make us all go back to the way you were taught. And actually, is that correct? Maybe it is correct, which is great, then let's do it. But there's never any kind of like, I don't feel like there's any forethought of like what's actually the best way to do something, and then let's do that. So, like you were saying about people that work till 2:30 and they get loads done. Well, if people can be as productive in that time, why is that bad? Why is that a bad thing? Is it a bad thing because I've never done that and therefore they shouldn't be allowed to do it? Or is it a bad thing because actually, no, the proof is that it doesn't help and it's not a good way of running things.
I don't know the answer, but I think we'd have a happier nation if people had more time, maybe.
Yeah, to do things that not even if they might not be doing things that they enjoy, but they just have more headspace, and you can breathe a bit, and you can maybe take that time to cook something once a week or twice a week.
Yeah.
I also think sharing the load is also super helpful. I think if people, well, was I in talking to John Turode, and he was saying that like the best thing to do in a dinner party situation is just all bring a dish, because then it's not one person that's super stressed. Everyone kind of shares that, but you're going to one person's house, and that person obviously does most of the cleaning and stuff. But I guess you could kind of do the same thing with dinner. Like, why can't you, between a group of a few friends, all cook a batch of something and then share it around a bit?
That's a really good idea.
I've only just come up with that. Maybe it won't work, but I feel like it could. You know, I think we often put a lot of pressure on ourselves and we're very. I think people in general kind of are too hard on themselves, and we need to be nicer. Can you tell I've had loads of therapy? That's the sort of thing my therapist
Yeah,
says.
me too. Which is why I'm loving all of it, because you're just saying all the things that I'm like, yes, exactly. This is exactly what we need to do.
And do as I say, not as I do, as well, because I'll be hard on myself.
It's very hard though to break that cycle of being hard on yourself about things.
Yeah, I think so. I think it is. But I think you just have to do as well as you can with these, you know, like going back to the ultra processed foods. If at the moment you're eating 80% of your diet's ultra processed foods and 20% isn't, well, maybe say by the end of the year, I want it to be 50-50. And then by the end of next year, I want to have gone the other way. But don't just go all in and be like, right, tomorrow, that's it. I'm cutting out all processed foods, which you can't do anyway, because even things like olive oil is processed, I think. So
Yeah,
there's
exactly.
that scale, isn't there, of how processed something is.
And it's just finding better alternatives. Like I've rediscovered the mayonnaise that comes in a tube, and it's spelt Thomy, Tomy. I don't know how you pronounce it.
Oh,
And I think it's a French brand. And on the back, the ingredients are literally like rapeseed oil, free range eggs, mustard,
nice.
salt. And you're like,
Yeah,
perfect. And it tastes
great.
incredible. And my kids don't really like it, which is even more perfect because they used to drink Hellman's out of the pots. So perfect.
I always find that I would live with a girl at uni, and she would put like half a jar of mayonnaise on her dinner. I never understood that. I mean, I like mayonnaise, don't get me wrong, but I don't want that much mayonnaise.
I don't want that much mayonnaise
No,
either.
I don't even want that much of it. Well, custard I'd have that much of, but not mayonnaise.
I discovered my son was eating that much mayonnaise because he was trying to get the pizza to be cooler. So he's dipping pizza slices. It's just revolting. Anyway, I've managed to break that habit.
Clever though.
Yeah. Absolutely amazing. I'm loving this chat. I kind of want to chat to you all day, but I can't.
Other people are going to tune out if you talk to me all day, because eventually they'll be like, "What is this guy talking about?"
Absolutely awesome. Where can people get your book from? Where can they get the Frozen Peas Cookbook?
All good bookshops.
All
I don't know why people say that, as if you can't find it there, doesn't mean it's a bad bookshop. It maybe someone else just bought it before you got there.
That's true.
Wherever you buy your books, I would say.
It's very
Amazon,
inclusive to bookshops.
Waterstones, independent bookshops, obviously, I think are fantastic.
Yeah.
But yeah, online, not from me personally, because I've run out of copies, but you can buy it in most bookshops, I hope.
Fantastic. So there's the cover to look out for. It's got a beautiful picture of frozen peas on the front and a pink outline. And yeah, get down to your nearest good, mediocre, or not even great bookshop to pick up a copy. And thank you so much, Sam. Thank you so much for your time and taking time out of your spa day. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you for having me. I'll go and have another dip now.
Enjoy. Take care.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for listening. You've been listening to Food Rebels, which is available on radio stations around the UK and further afield. You can also listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify and Audible. Please remember to subscribe and rate us with 5 stars or follow us. It makes such a difference, not just to our podcast and radio show, but it really helps to support the guests that come on the show with us. We're also on Instagram at food_rebels. So give us a follow, do get in touch. We love hearing from you and let us know what you think. Thanks so much for joining us and make sure you taste the rebellion.